Awesome. Thank you for that intro. So I'm really excited to be here. Kind of full circle. And we'll get into this a little bit in my background here, but used to actually use InventoryLab as a seller. So it's kind of cool to now be speaking here. So yeah, my presentation. When I was asked to speak, I had a lot of ideas about what I wanted to speak on. A lot of times I geek out with like peak performance and, shifting perspectives. And I wanted to still do parts of that in a way that was very, like, I basically want to help sellers shift their perspective and then use that to have massive growth, if that makes sense. So I sat down and said, okay, well, great title for this, how to boost your sales by 40% on Autopilot. And I'll show you exactly how we're going to do that. But a little bit of background on me, if you don't know who I am. My name is Dillon Carter. I'm the one of the co-founders and the current COO here at Aura. I actually started, like most sellers, with retail arbitrage, and then went to online arbitrage, which I was horrible at, funny enough. And then eventually hit my first fork in the road, right? Most sellers hit this, you decide, okay, well, if I really want to go crazy with it, I can either go private label or go wholesale. For me at the time, I was in college. I needed to pay the bills. So I decided wholesale made the most sense, right? I could cash flow very quickly. Private label was fantastic for, building out this big brand and then exiting down the road, but I needed cash flow. So I actually went the wholesale route. And that was probably one of the best things I ever did, because that enabled me to, one, learn a ton. Wholesale was very difficult back then. This was 7-8 years ago at this point. And so eventually that led me to creating the Wholesale Made Easy podcast. I wanted to teach what I was learning, because access to that education just wasn't as readily available as it is now, which is amazing. And so every Tuesday for, I think, 2.5 years in our Facebook group, we live sourced. We literally shared and we live sourced brands and products for hours on end, and it was fantastic. And then that eventually led me to meeting my co-founder, James, and launching Aura. So we decided, we had an opportunity here to both be sellers, like we both understood that innately because we had done it, and we had the engineering capabilities. James was actually a computer science major at the time. So kind of a crazy winding road, but we ended up launching Aura and it took off, which was fantastic. And so since then I've geeked out with a lot of different topics, but a lot has changed, right? So when I talk about shifting perspective, I see a lot of sellers, and we've seen tens of thousands of sellers come through our doors at this point, thinking about Amazon in the wrong way, right? You have a lot of people come from the eBay world where it's very much that flipping mentality, which is awesome. But out of all the things that I could cover, and there's a plethora of options here, I wanted to pick 3 that I think we could really hone in on and really understand better. At the end of the day, Amazon is a volume-based model. It's not a flipping model, right? And so when you start to think about that, it shifts how you operate your business. And I think that's incredibly important as a foundational understanding of being a business owner, a founder in the Amazon space, right? It's not about how big the ROI is per unit necessarily. It's, okay, how can you do that at scale, right? And that's becoming more and more possible with new tools, new services, using things like prep centers, right? You're able to scale your operations very quickly. And there's obviously a maturing industry. Every single year, it's funny, January hits and is Amazon dead? Is it too late? No, because we've been asking that question for at least the almost decade I've been in this space, and that's yet to change. It's actually gotten just different, right? It evolves. But what worked 2 years ago, or even 6 months ago in some cases, doesn't work now. And so we have to think about, how do we adapt ourselves? How do we adapt what tools we're utilizing to enable us to operate within that volume-based model? And speed. I'm noticing a new generation of sellers come online, and especially if you're in the Twitter platform, you'll definitely have noticed this as well. The speed at which we're able to scale operations is incredible. And by operations, I mean sales, I mean sourcing, right? The fact that you have access to copious amounts of capital is incredible, whether that's debt, equity, there's different partners as well. Being able to have access to that and utilizing the correct tools to source properly enable you to scale really, really fast. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. I'm seeing numbers now where sellers in 6-12 months are hitting numbers that I couldn't even have dreamt of after 3 years of being a seller back in the day, so to speak. And so you have a lot of things happening here, right? And when we talk about speed, particularly, I like to really hone in on risk mitigation. A lot of sellers, when I've dived deep with them, they've said, hey, I need to raise capital. And okay, well, let's take a look at your current inventory, right? What's happening? And they end up having tens of thousands of dollars sitting in stale inventory, and unfortunately, in some cases, accruing storage fees, right? Which is terrible. And so there's this concept, and I'm a finance major, so I geek out with these kind of concepts, but there's a concept called present value of money. And that basically means that a dollar today, in general, is worth more than a dollar tomorrow. Well, when you start to think about it from that perspective, it's how fast can you spend your capital and get your ROI back, right? You want to compress that time, and that time compression is getting really, really fast. You're starting to see prep centers churn out inventory almost that exact same day as shipping, especially for like our OA audience here, is getting compressed as well. Everything just speeds up. And there's something to that, because now you have your capital being able to be churned through rapidly. Whereas it would have taken, let's say, 2 months, 8 years ago to churn through your capital. Now you're talking potentially days. And as we start to think about where does the future of being an Amazon seller go to, it's in this world. It's this fast-paced, high scalable, high-tech model. And so sellers are up against some tough things. I pulled some stats here from Jungle Scout, and this is updated for 2022, as well as eDesk here. There's 3,700 new sellers joining every single day. And 58% have less than $5,000 in starting capital, and 54% are actually working full-time jobs. So what does that mean? That means you have more competition, you have less capital, and you have less time. Now, I mentioned earlier, you have access to more capital, right? So this is another one of those kind of mindset shifts where you need to shift from this kind of hobby-based model to we're building a company, we're building a business here, right? So you have more competition, less capital, less time, the average seller getting started, while at the same time operating in a business model that is high volume based in a maturing industry, and a industry that is really being predicated on speed now. That's a tough world to operate in. So this leads us to two major aspects that we like to think. We like to put things into models here. So on one side, how effective are you at sourcing, and how efficient are you at sourcing, right? Let's feed the beast, right? And then on the back end, how are you generating sales and churning that investment, that capital you spent, into an ROI, and how fast can you do that entire model back to back to back, right? That's where pricing starts to come in. 82% organic sales happen in the buy box, right? We know this, but then we're operating in a 24/7 world. That means you need to be optimized 24/7. No longer is it the case that you can sit down and say, well, every now and then I'm just going to match the buy box, or every now and then I'm going to go ahead and optimize things. The world we operate in now, if this has finally come to the Amazon world, is 24/7, 365, real time. Every moment you are not optimized, every single SKU, every single price, you are losing out on the opportunity to actually get the sale, and therefore reducing your risk of holding that inventory, right? Plenty of you have seen where a listing is looking great, it's selling, it's stable, and then it self-destructs for some reason, right? The market changes at the end of the day. This is something we've noticed in the data, right? And this is kind of intuitive if you think about it. As the market for each listing changes, you either reduce your risk or increase your risk, right? If all of a sudden the buy cost of a SKU you've been carrying as a replen gets cut in half for whatever reason, that SKU's marketplace, if you will, just changed. That game has changed. And so by holding inventory for longer than you should, hoping for a slightly higher ROI, is actually hurting your business in the long run. This is why we like to talk about that concept of present value of money. getting $1 today, even at a slightly lower ROI, and being able to redeploy it multiple times in the same period equates to a higher ROI than getting that, slightly higher win later. I know that sounds kind of weird, but roll with me here. It's kind of dorky. And there's infinite variables at play, right? Like at the end of the day, things are becoming more and more complex. Even if you look at Amazon's new API, they're including more data points. Gone are the days where you could sit down and say, let me just do X. There's so many things baked into what X should be that we as humans just cannot do it. I mean, look, we now live in a world where GPT-4, ChatGPT, is becoming readily available for like $20 a month, right? That's something we've been playing around with here. Having a system that enables you to properly consume those levels of complexities and do the correct thing, again, 24/7, 365 in real time, that's paramount moving forward. And we kind of, again, we geek out, I know, but there's this cool quote that I've been really pondering probably the last 3 or 4 years, right? I'm a big automation guy. And this is actually by Alfred Whitehead. He's a mathematician, but it extends into other areas. So it says, civilization advances by extending the number of important operations which we can perform without thinking about them. In other words, how many things can we move to the background of our lives that continue to work so we don't have to think about it, right? As a business owner, as a founder, this is what you do to begin with, right? You take on all the roles, you wear all the hats when you first get started, and then slowly you say, well, you're going to own this now. You're going to own listing optimization. You're going to own sourcing. Now you don't have to think about that anymore. And that frees you up to go do more important, critical work. So when we start to think about what is that future for sellers, thinking about it from this perspective, well, ultimately the goal should be, how do we increase sales while maintaining a healthy profit without thinking about it? That's incredibly important here. And that's what we like to work on. So how do you boost your sales by 40% on Autopilot? Well, it's having an optimal price 24/7 without thinking about it, right? And that's what repricing ultimately does. This is why when we decided to go into the software game, we picked repricing because, one, it was incredibly complex even back then, and it's becoming increasingly more complex now. But it's one of those things that can be one of the biggest growth levers for the average seller. We have countless testimonials of people going from, this is a hobby, to I'm doing this full time and I quit my job because we're now optimized 24/7. We tend to see an average of basically 40% increase in sales, which is why we're using that term 40%. What's so interesting about that is how it compounds over time. Getting your capital back more quickly at a healthy profit means you get to compound that capital more rapidly. That's actually very, very incredible. Think about the liquidity. I've been a seller in a case where you have access to very profitable inventory, but just you don't have access to your capital right now because it's tied up. What if that wasn't a problem? That's kind of interesting. So we like working on this problem. We kind of geek out with it, to be honest. If any of you have seen me on podcasts or interviews or anything like that, I really geek out with this kind of stuff. We have actually been sellers. And that's one of the things we love about working on this type of problem. We understand the level of impact it can have because we've experienced it ourselves. And at the end of the day, we're builders. We like building things. We like to sit down and just say, what if we could do it this way? And that's kind of what we've been up to these past few years. We've actually been building out the company, the team. Being an awesome bootstrap profitable company has been fantastic, and we're continuously scaling that up, which is awesome. And part of how we're thinking about this problem moving forward and solving this problem is kind of in this new modern way. A lot of things are changing. That's why we ultimately announce we're calling it version 1, recently. And there are a few key things that are happening here that we think are very important. One, AI repricing strategies makes a ton of sense. There's a lot of work to be done there, and there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of breadth and variety in terms of how you approach that. That's super interesting. Mobile support, particularly for OA sellers, right? When you're just out and about, or RA sellers, I'm sorry, when you're out and about and you just need to be able to control things, great, you should be able to do that. We're seeing a world that is more mobile friendly. You're not always just sitting at a computer. And what if we had more optimized mobile friendly workflows? we're working on that. Obviously, scaling out to all 20 marketplaces, that's a huge win. It makes a ton of sense. That's an easy one. But also thinking about, well, if we were to rebuild, or if we were just to build Aura today, would it be the same as it currently is? No. So we are actually rebuilding and redesigning it from the ground up. We actually have a product designer on the team from Quantopian, Crayon, these awesome, amazing startups. So we're optimizing these things, right? Like how you use it, how do you interact with it, right? What do you get out of it? What do you put into it? And working with users along the way to optimize that, which is fantastic. And there's tons and tons of improvements, like, small and light support, reduced profit ranges. We have a lot of, kind of secretive stuff in there too. But one that's particularly exciting is actually hyperdrive. So we found a way to essentially get sub 10-second repricing. And what that means is not just on our end, but actually having that reflected, which is pretty cool. On average, when you look at repricing, most are considered instant, but it still takes 1.5 to 2 minutes for that to actually reflect once it's submitted. We found a way to bypass that. And so actually in testing that in beta, we're seeing roughly an 80% buy box ownership on a lot of competitive listings, which is actually honestly stupidly incredible. Hopefully that, that scales out. So we're working on testing a lot of interesting things that are just now becoming possible. New API, new technology, things like that. And so we're actually re-architecting the entire tool, the entire platform from the ground up to enable us to do some of these incredible things. And so, hyperdrive is one of those things we've been playing around with. Here's just kind of a little sneak peek, if you will, of what the new UI UX will look like. There's a ton of stuff obviously hidden in here, but that's essentially what we're working on. And so, this is a lot to cover. There's not a lot of time to cover a lot of this. So with that, I think I'd like to kind of switch gears over to a Q&A. We're doing a giveaway, which I'm super pumped about. So we'll definitely do that. And would love to dive into any particulars that anybody has. I know this is like kind of fast paced. There's a lot to cover here, obviously. But want to make sure we can get through everything. So would love to take on any questions that anybody has. And obviously enter in the giveaway, because we're giving away an entire free year of Aura, which is pretty exciting. And if you haven't checked out what we're doing with the recent announcement, go to goaura.com/one. That's essentially a massive sneak peek of what is to come. And you can join the wait list, which is pretty awesome. So we're already beta testing this new system with a lot of users, and we'll begin migrating users here shortly. So make sure you get on that wait list. Awesome. Cool. Patricia, appreciate that. Love the love. That's awesome. Yeah, just wait until you get to experience what we've been working on. That's going to be fun.
Hey, Dillon, this is Yoshi, and hello, everybody. This is Yoshi Imamura, one of the customer champions here at InventoryLab. I actually myself did have a question for you. Yeah. Seeing as you are so involved at the beginnings of Aura, what was one of the main motivations for that particular name?
Oh, for the name? Oh, yeah, good question. The thought process behind that is essentially there's an aura around your seller account that is always looking out and optimizing your pricing. That was kind of the initial thought process in choosing the name Aura.
Wow, that's a really intuitive one. I actually never really thought of it that way, but the way that you bring that up, this raises a huge point. Yeah. And it looks like Ashley came at us with a question of how can Aura help when the buy box is suppressed?
Nice. Yeah. So currently the way we approach this, and this is a strategy level setting that you can set, we basically check if it's suppressed, and then what we can do is we can slowly lower that price point until you do one of two things. You either reactivate the buy box, and then awesome, we just go back to repricing as normal, or two, you reach your minimum price. And sometimes the way a min and max price is set is actually slightly higher than what Amazon will allow you to reactivate the buy box at, in which case, because we don't know actually what it is, Amazon won't tell us, unfortunately. Depending on what your strategy level settings are, we'll either hold you there, which is still increasing the possibility of you getting sales, or we'll actually oscillate back through this, right? So we'll restart that that cycle. We'll actually go to your max price and slowly bring it back down as well. That kind of goes to show the importance of a really healthy and realistic min and max price, which is a whole presentation on its own. But the way we tend to see work really well, slowly lower that. That way we can reactivate it as high as possible.
And it looks like we have an additional question here from Patricia of when can we do better searches via Aura, like by product name or category?
Yes. Yeah. So this is part of one of the reasons why we wanted to not just add new features, but actually re-architect. So rebuild it from the ground up, is enabling you to have better search functionality, not only in the actual search field, which is super important. That's something we actually want to expand out, but also being able to say, hey, show me all of my Nike products, and then just seeing that in one field. We're also taking the listings table view and allowing you to add way more advanced filters. Part of those filters is actually a fully customized table view. So you actually get to say, hey, I only care about these 6 variables for each SKU. The rest of them you can hide. And then I care about them in this type of order. So you can actually reorder that. So what we're thinking about now is not every seller views their data the same way, right? What's important to you is potentially number 3 in importance to another seller. We've had tons of conversations at this point. And so what we're thinking about there is, well, how do we make it so that you can customize the way in which you view your metrics, your data, your analytics, as well as the SKUs themselves. So that's definitely coming in this new release, which is super exciting. So less horizontal scroll, which is good.
So in regards to that release, looks like we may have had a question from Jose Hernandez. When is it going to be available for everybody?
Yeah, so right now we're in the beta testing phase. Obviously, lots of changes here, including the repricing side as well, not just little features. So right now we're in the beta testing phase, and we have a pretty large wait list. And what we're doing is, as we get through each beta phase, we're basically inviting new users from that wait list. So we should begin publicly migrating users on that wait list sometime in Q2, could be towards the end. And then we'll have a full-on public, like everybody can come in now after that, once that's wrapped up. So, with any major software release, obviously you want to take your steps appropriately. Beta test, there's always going to be bugs you need to find. So right now we're starting with a lot of our very, very large sellers that are, we have sellers doing multiple millions in revenue every single month with us, obviously. So we're starting with them because their volume's much higher. So yeah, should be relatively soon actually, which is pretty exciting.
And it looks like we may have had a follow-up from Jose here in regards to what the price would be for it, if there's any changes to that.
Yeah, so right now we are $97 per month. We have a single price tier right now. We will most likely be moving to a multi-tiered kind of packaging. That way we can actually segment users based on their size and what they really need, right? It's hard to give you features that you don't really need at a certain level and be like, hey, pay for those. So we're actually getting more granular in that way. That way you're not paying for features that you don't need, especially these more advanced features that we're adding, that some of them are not going to be as valuable to newer sellers, but are extremely valuable and oftentimes are required for much larger sellers. I can't tell you what that price point is going to be or what that packaging split is going to be. That's something we're actually going to work with users on to develop.
And thank you, Ashley Powers, for asking your question. Ashley says, also, will the new Aura be better at considering small and light items when repricing at ROI?
Yes. So one of the major things is small and light support. After talking with a number of users, and essentially to give you some background here, for 6 months, we essentially talked with multiple users every single day via Zoom, had in-depth conversations to find the patterns, and obviously look at our actual support documentation and data there. But small and light is one of those things that has become way, way more used, that we are we have to do it. So we will, yeah. So what's nice is there's a big release in going from our current system to the new system, right? Because that's we're actually migrating users to a whole new system. Post that, though, we have a laundry list of a roadmap that we want to start iteratively working on. So we'll have a big release, which will grant you not only a ton of bug fixes, a better UI in our opinion, and major new features, but there's also a ton of smaller stuff that we want to add as we go past that relaunch. So yeah, definitely a lot coming your way, but small and light for sure.
Alrighty, and that so far seems to be it in regards to the questions. Just doing one last check here, and looks like we're all good in that regard. Let's go ahead and see who we got for the giveaway, if you just allow us one brief moment.
Awesome.
All right, and our giveaway wizard Kelly says our winner is Jose Hernandez.
Awesome. Perfect. Awesome. Jose, congrats. So Jose, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get your email, and then I'm going to email you directly. That way we get you set up, and you should be all sorted out.
All righty. In that regard, Dillon, thank you so much for your time with us today. And everyone, thank you so much for attending. As mentioned, Jose, if you can get Dillon your email, or if anything, you could also look me up, Yoshi Imamura, and ping me your email, and I'll be sure that Dillon receives that. But other than that, do we have any other closing remarks, Dillon?
No, I really appreciate you guys having me on here. It's a lot to cover in a short period of time, so I apologize if it feels like a fire hose, but wanted to make sure we can cover as much ground as we could. And Jose, I went ahead and added my email there. Just go ahead and send me an email directly, and we'll get you sorted out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again for your time, Dillon, and we'll go ahead and see us out.
Awesome.